They're bragging on us right now over in Europe. So
Congratulations. Thank you so very much. To the esteemed members of this conference, we thoroughly appreciate your time in allowing us to be a part of this. Forgive me, we're going to do a quick introduction to the audience here, but we will be right back into it. Ladies and gents, how are y'all doing today? Excellent. Thank you guys for coming. Again, I'm Victor Dandridge, the hardest working man in comics. I'm a phenomenological neurotologist as well as a comic writer. And joining me, actually asking me to join him on this presentation is Dr. Scott Jordan, who is one of the coolest guys of all time. He's a clinical psychologist, dean of, is it just the psychology department?
I'm a chair psychologist.
Chair at Illinois State University. And we are here to talk about Invincible with the leading question, why is it so good? Why? Right? So, Scott, let's jump right into it, man.
Thank you very much, Victor, for that introduction. So, what we want to talk about is the type of storytelling that goes on in comic books. And different types of storytelling require different socio-motor cognitive skills. So, for example, talking to each other, telling a story like this, right? It relies quite a bit on social ability, reading the demeanor of your co-authors as you jointly create a story. And then when you sit and read a book by yourself, it's a completely different set of skills that come to the table. You usually don't read in the situation depicted in the first one, right? You're reading, you're alone, and data actually indicate that one of the reasons reading takes us so long is because we reorganize the relationship between two brain lobes.
Right.
So you actually are changing the structure of your brain by culture forcing you to understand meaning by eye movements and symbols. And of course, comics is the type of storytelling that we're going to talk about today. And just a few things out of the way. The thing that goes on in comics is that combinations of text bubbles, captions, frame size, and page turns. Marry those to individual images or sequences help the reader create a cognitive space for the story, allowing them to develop anticipations of what's to come, while simultaneously indulging in surprising violations of those expectations, right? Boom, she hits it. I don't know if you read it.
Well, that's one of the beautiful things about comics is that the frame of storytelling involved is a combination of so many different aspects, both the visual, the literature, the understanding of social norms, right? Cultural norms, as something as simple as what we just looked at. In Western comics, we know that we read from left to right, top to bottom. In Eastern comics, they read in a different formula. So, like you said, the page turn aspect of the storytelling becomes different. You know, what we would pick up in terms of like your traditional manga, we would accidentally read it backwards. In which case, we would say this story is terrible. They tell you the end of the joke before they tell you the setup. This is weird, but it's because culturally, the framework of how we read is even different.
Exactly.
So, yeah, a lot of different tools that you're using when you're coming to this.
Yeah, the first time I read manga, I couldn't start at the back, and then I didn't know if I should go right or left in the frames, or so the conference that we're at in Europe right now is called Coherence in Comics. So I want to explain a little bit about what coherence means. So if we define coherence in comics as a writer's ability to produce text and influence artwork that affords non-contradictory world building. So for example, these two characters are the same two characters you saw on the last page. So there's not a contradiction in terms of who the characters are. That's what we call world building, right? On the part of the reader, is there merit in violating those expectations? So building a world for you and then suddenly generating contradictions. And the answer we're going to say is most definitely yes.
Yes.
Right? Just a quick bit about brains. This is your brain reacting to a surprise. So that green line on the bottom is what goes on in your brain when in fact you're seeing something you didn't anticipate seeing. All right? This is an image of your brain in a fear state, and the orange there is meant to depict areas of the brain that are above average active in response to a fear stimulus. This is your brain on surprise. Right? And what we can see is that surprise actually engages massive amounts of your brain, because most of the time we're tooling around the world as zombies, just flying on autopilot, just doing what we do. Like, for example, all of you know how to walk. You don't have to think about it unless you have too much to drink, and then you're done anyway. But surprise matters because it allows you to get out of zombie mode and actually create possibilities for how you might do things differently.
Wait, before you move forward, I do want to talk about the idea that how difficult it is to create surprise. You know, it is almost impossible to surprise yourself, right? You would have to have such a dissonance from the actual activity that it's borderline impossible. There's always going to be some form of recognition and memory of what you've done in order to get to that space. So that's why, like, you can scare yourself easily, right? How many times have we ever done that? We think we're alone, and we hear something, and we actively have this sense of fear, but surprise is really hard to generate. It almost requires other people's interaction. So it's a very social-oriented engagement piece because it requires other people in order for it to happen.
That is a really good point.
Thank you.
You know, I'm serious because data clearly indicate that, for example, people diagnosed as schizophrenic can actually tickle themselves.
Right.
And the reason they can tickle themselves is because their brain doesn't anticipate what it will feel when they do this like your brain does. Right? It's the same reason they experience hallucinations and delusions, is because their brains are generating delusions and hallucinations, but they're not keeping track of it. They're not distinguishing their own brain work from the world's brain work. So yeah, it's hard to surprise yourself.
Absolutely.
I've never thought about it that way, but
that's what I'm here for. This is the little commentary that's my expertise right there.
Surprise rocks. Surprise is how we get out of zombie state.
Absolutely.
So this is one of my favorite comic scenes ever. Christopher Priest, Black Panther 20, where Evan Ross is in Wakanda for the first time, and you say the female character's name because I always get it wrong.
Nakia?
Queen Divine Justice?
Yeah. Okay. Nakia, or any member of the Door of Elijah really kind of sets that up.
So so what we're looking at is a monorail in Wakanda here, right? And we see villagers, we see business-oriented type people all on a train together. And this is Evan Ross's thinking. I finally knew for the first time why the client, i.e. the Black Panther, was the way he was. He had an impossible job, sworn protector of the land that was waiting to tear itself apart. So in terms of Evan Ross's eyes, who works for the CIA, he sees all this diversity as a huge threat, right? And somehow it's all going to fall apart. And then he looks back and he sees Queen Divine Justice, who was raised in the United States, who's never been in Wakanda, actually experiencing Wakanda for the first time. And this is one of the most beautiful comic frames I've ever seen, where she says, sure, it's just, they're black people, you know? We're riding a monorail into the world's most technologically advanced cities, built and occupied by black people. And I've read about it, of course, but being here, seeing these beautiful faces, it just changes everything. That's what a lot of people experience when they saw Black Panther for the first time, right? And when they saw that dome come down over Wakanda, and they saw all this beauty and diversity so that surprise is what a writer works to achieve. Not all, well, we'll say the good ones.
Definitely the great ones. Definitely the great ones.
So what we're going to do here is riff a little bit on some frames from Invincible. I'm going to just say a bit about why this frame's here, and then Victor, who is the god of Invincible, will tell you what expectations have been built and violated because of this frame. So here's a bit where our hero Mark is obviously already a superhero and is considering quitting school. He's talking to his mom about it, and suddenly he gets a call from his boss, you gotta go. So if you want to say anything about,
of course,
this steps up and violates.
So first I have to give a shout out to Robert Kirkman, the writer and co-creator of Invincible, also Corey Walker, the original artist and co-creator, and then Ryan Otley, who took over a majority of the series. All are phenomenal storytellers in their own right. And for Ryan especially, we got to see him become an amazing storyteller. The thing about this in Invincible in general is that the idea is to set up tropes and then do the opposite of the expectation. And so we all know that, in the sense of being a superhero, they're always supposed to say the right thing, right? And at no point is it ever common for a superhero to suggest for anyone to drop out of school. That's not normal, But here we are with Mark, a teenage superhero who's in the midst of these things that has this understanding of practicality. I don't actually need school. And the idea behind it is, what am I going to do? Am I going to be an engineer? Am I going to be a doctor? Am I going to be anything that requires education? No. I've already had my career set before me because I gained these superpowers. I'm already employed at the government. This is my job. I don't need certification of any kind in order to do this job effectively, professionally. This is my job. So why should I pretend in this facet of being normal and going to school like any other person my age when that is not the actuality of my life? Mm-hmm. And the great part about this is his mother, because of her experience, is actually somewhat open to it, despite the fact that in her normal, lifestyle, because she does not have powers, wants to look at this and go, no, it's important for you to go to college because, this is important. But then she has to recognize that's not his reality, it's hers. And that's not something that's common in terms of superhero books, not at all.
Or parenting skills.
Oh, not at all, you know what I mean? My kid tells me, Dad, I'm not going, yeah, you are. That's one of those things.
So this violation here is kind of across different comic books, right? And across large-scale cultural expectations about what heroes are. And in the next little bit in the narrative, we get to a character called Immortal, who's grieving because he just lost his partner. So is there anything in that grieving, the way they've expressed it, that would be a violation or surprising?
It's so sad to say, but yes. Because a lot of times, superheroes, particularly male superheroes, are not shown with this sense of vulnerability. The idea that they love someone enough that they question their position, their role as a hero with the loss of them. Mind you, we've had things like the Injustice series, where Superman loses Lois Lane, but instead of grieving, he goes violent. Well, I shouldn't say instead of grieving, but his act of grief is to go violent.
Yeah.
In this way, Immortal somewhat goes withdrawn, and he's not sure that he wants to do this life that put his love in danger. He's not sure if he's up to it. He gets convinced, of course, to do so because he is a man of honor, a man of duty, and he understands the greater good. But this sense of vulnerability, I don't know if I want this, I don't know if I can do this, is very uncommon. Even when Superman, kills Joker, spoiler, in the Injustice series, he's not questioning whether or not he should do it. Right. He just goes and does it. This is the action, and it precipitates the rest of the story. This is a quiet moment.
No, it is, and it's so honest. I don't know. I just don't know. So the reason I got the word page there is because I want to go back to this page. So Mark was having his little world, and he has to fly off, and Immortal's having his world, both of which are surprising us in terms of what they're showing. And the next page is this.
Yes.
Right? And the fact that you've got these two characters on the bottom breaking frame, and suddenly, boom, this character breaking frame on this Alan the Alien, who is like the Big Lebowski of the universe, just coming in with what are called intergalactic grooviness that we know about already, right? We know that he's that kind of guy, and the first thing you see Immortal do is attack him. Right?
Absolutely.
And you see this sort of traditional trope of hero conflict. And then we find Alan the Alien in Mark's dorm bedroom a few pages later. And I'll let Victor explain why Mark doesn't have that hero attack vibe with Alan the Alien.
So if you've read the series or watched the show, you know that the initial interaction with Mark, Invincible, and Alan was actually that aggressive piece. Mark was sent to be aggressive, as was the Immortal, and the idea that in terms of following directions, they just engaged in a violent superhero interaction. Here's an alien, clearly they mean harm, go fight them. Mark, wisely, because he was actually outmatched in the equation, asked a question, why are you here? And Alan has a conversation with him, and it quells the aggression between them. So when Immortal goes out there, Mark does meet him eventually and goes, there's no reason to fight, he's actually a friend. And they're like, oh, wait, really? He was like, yeah, if you just asked him a question, you could have solved all of this. Like, you just went in there guns blazing, throwing fists. Ask a question.
Because Cecil told you.
Cecil told you. So, there's that sense of superheroes without their own sense of agency, but also a sense of self-righteousness. Obviously, whatever I do is the right thing because I'm doing it. That's incorrect. If you feel that way, you're probably a sociopath. I just want you to know that. Not judging you, just giving you a heads up. But in this moment, what ends up happening is with this conversation between Alan and Mark, they have this understanding that we don't have to fight to move forward, to progress. Even in the context of disagreeing, because we do see this in this sequence, they disagree on the course of action. Mark, as a member of the Viltrumite race, which is a very we'll say conquering race. I feel very strongly about what the Viltrumites are. Mark is a member of this race, but not having the specific ties to them is very intriguing to the organization that Alan represents, the Coalition of Planets. And so he's been sent to Earth to collect Mark, to bring him before the leader of the Coalition of Planets, so that they can use him in their war against the Viltrumites. Now, here we have a very simple idea of two heroes in ComFor. Mark doesn't want to go. It's just that simple. Alan is strong enough that he very well could make him go, absolutely, but they don't want to do that. That would be counter to the overall goal. For Alan to make him go, he might have to hurt him. And if he hurts him, then he's not going to be as effective. And that sense of cognizant, understanding changes the dynamic of what we would normally see. Normally it would be, we're going to fight, and then there's an outside force that they have to team up against, and then they stop. That's the norm. Instead, they're sitting around having a conversation. And better than that, Mark comes up with a solution, a substitution even, as to why he shouldn't go, and something for Alan to gain that might be better suited. I don't want to spoil it exactly, but it's something that he can go get that might actually take the place of Mark being there personally.
That's fantastic. So, this frame is Eve.
Yes.
This is Mark's potential girlfriend. They kind of liked each other for a while. And what we did here was we picked a series of about 13 issues, and we both just took note of what surprised us as we went through them. And Victor wrote that the nature of the relationship that develops between Mark and Eve is surprising. And so I looked because I had noted this page, and what I love about this page is in the very middle, which is the largest frame, she's not only looking at you, she's pulling her hair back so you see her entire face. And it's the ultimate moment of vulnerability, and it's the ultimate moment of her truth, where she tells not just I love you, but she tells all the nuanced feelings that she has when they were attracted to each other or earlier and things didn't work out or whatever. And then this is him on the next page. And what they do is they give you full face. His eyes aren't quite front. That was a choice they made. But all that text there is his nuanced understanding of there are things I like, I don't understand, things I don't like, and it's incredibly complex. It's the kind of thinking about relationship that people often don't even hear. And here it is in this fantastic comic book, supposedly aged 12 to 16. I want to go to the next one if I can, if that's all right, because this is kind of our last riff, but it builds up. And we get all these different scales of world building and scales of contradiction, and it's just joyous. So, Immortal
yes.
Left.
He quit. He quit being a superhero. His pain was too much. He didn't like the life. It cost him. Mind you, this is a character that's been around for hundreds of years. Yeah. It's not the first time that he's lost a spouse. Right. This one mattered to him in a way that he says, I don't want to do this anymore. And so he secludes himself, goes off into the woods to live his life as he's going to, as a regular person, as much as that means to him.
Yeah.
And then
his girlfriend shows.
She's still alive. Her name is Duplicate, right? And we know her, we've seen her in Teen Team. If you've watched the show, there was an interaction between her and Rexplode that caused the separation between Rex and Eve. Duplicate has the ability to create multiples of herself. And this is actually something that is very wise in the use of duplication powers. There's not that many characters that do this, right? Jamie Madrox, the Multiple Man, has done it. And in the sense of storytelling, there have been those times where they use this as a kind of surprise venture. We think Multiple Man has died, but oh wait, there is a dupe, and that's amazing. What we find out with this is that this is actually a consorted process that Duplicate and her brother Multipole do. They have a singular one, their originator, that they leave somewhere safe. That originator is never to be in danger. It's not that it's a dupe that is, put aside that maybe can survive. The original is never to be in danger. And so what I think is very interesting about this is a subtlety of the actual design. All of the duplicates, when they're made, they actually have a number on them that changes. So the very interesting part is there's been a lie this entire time. The one duplicate that has the number 1 is technically number 2. And so why it just generates in succession on its own, we don't know, and it's never actually explained. But the 0 dude never walks around with the 0. It doesn't tell you that that's the originator. It always says number 1. So in this regard, that's something that's very interesting. They never actually explain how that worked. Maybe it's a flub, who knows? But it's one of those things that it's really interesting to see it, that the number 1 dude purposefully is left behind to live whatever private life they're going to live, but they can still vicariously be a superhero or villain, in Paul's case, as through the other bodies that they can inhabit or create.
So the take-home message here is leave your soul self in your safe house.
That's right. That's right.
Exactly. Okay. So this next series of panels, we're going to, Victor's going to voice over, because it's a bunch.
Yes.
But it just plays these things out, and it's incredibly coherent. So go ahead and tell them.
So, quick catch-up, right? Again, if you've seen the first season, there are aspects of this that you understand. We have the character Rick Sheridan, who was, at college with Mark and his best friend, and they, were building a relationship. Rick, is an awesome guy, right? And we actually get kind of a bump in the storytelling about Rick and his boyfriend, I guess.
Yes.
In the show, and it happens differently in the book. So in this regard, what still happens, though, is Rick is kidnapped, and he is mutilated in an experiment to turn him into this more efficient soldier-type piece by this character, D.A. Sinclair. And in the aftermath of that event, Rick has been as well restored as he possibly can, and he's trying to showcase this sense of normalcy. The guys go out, I think they go bowling, and they're just trying to hang out. And while Mark and I can't think of his friend's name all of a sudden, it's terrible. They're having a good time. Rick is suffering. He is having this mental breakdown. The trauma of the experience that happened to him is not something that he can escape. Not with friends, not with activities. It is a lived experience for him constantly. And he just breaks down. And he's just like, I can't deal with this. Willie, that's his name. He's like, I can't deal with this. And he runs away, dejecting himself. Really. Like, it's not that the guys were like, oh, you're freaking us out.
He just can't be there.
He just can't be there.
And so, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, and this sets up this idea of victim trauma that you actually don't see in comics regularly.
And it shows you that Mark has encountered this gentleman's trauma.
Right.
He's not in his head, but he's seen what all that did to him. Mm-hmm. And this middle frame with the jagged edge memory, they hurt, man. That's the point, right? And all that just is contrasted even more and more by the warm night, evening background of that. Just stellar work. All right, so we're going to... You talk over this as we go,
Okay.
And just one quick note to the conference organizers, we're going to be finished, not you guys, but the conference over there, we're going to be finished in about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So,
yes.
All right, so we're talking about memory, morality, and context now.
Yes.
And the creation of morality and the deconstruction of morality. Okay?
So, excuse me, Invincible went for about 144 issues. So we're about a third of the way into the series at this point. And we didn't know, obviously, that it was going to only run 144 issues. So at this point, we're about close to issue 50, which is a hallmark moment in comics. And so one of the biggest things that you can do is to shake up the status quo in the best way possible. And what this really boils down to is this real strong conversation in context of the morality of superheroics versus, we'll say, global safety.
Yeah.
And we've had this conversation in the last 20 years of what is the price of freedom? What is the price of your safety? Are there things that are done that, generally speaking, we wouldn't agree with? Probably. And what happens when that is told in the context of superheroics? So we have this character, Doc Seismic. He has made a move, a huge move, where he's captured almost all of the super people in the United States, right? There's only 2 that are open, right? And it's Invincible and Eve. He didn't manage to capture them. And so they're sent to try to rescue everyone else. It works for a moment, but Doc Seismic gets the better of them, and in order to effectively save everyone else, Cecil uses some, we'll call it unorthodox means to save everyone. He sends in some ringers that turn the tide. This character Darkwing, who Mark had encountered previously, who was killing people. He was acting as a vigilante, but literally killing people in a deranged state. He had been trapped in a space, kind of affected his entire perspective, and so Mark was sent to stop him. And he
by
did.
Cecil.
By Cecil. You know, he was sent to stop him, much in the same way. You're a bad guy. Cecil has sent me. I aggress. I capture you. This is what happens. He turns him in, but unknown to him, Cecil did not incarcerate him. In fact, what he did was he offered him an opportunity. I'll let you help us. You know, when I need you, you can work. Mark, obviously knowing that he's a killer, attacks him. Because he's like, no, you're not supposed to be out of jail. Like, what did you do, escape? Like, what is this? Like, this isn't a thing. So he attacks him. Of course, the rest of the superhero community, who had just been saved by this guy, looks at Mark and goes, what are you doing? Like, this guy just helped us. Like, why are you fighting him? And Mark is like, don't you know what he did? Like, did you guys not see this? You know, in the intro, Mark had, I believe, had been off-world, so he didn't know that this wasn't something that everyone knew about. And so this became a problem, a huge problem for Mark. Mark is like, no, we're good guys, we don't employ bad people, not literal killers, we don't do this. So he goes to Cecil to confront him. And upon doing so, at an inopportune time, D.A. Sinclair walks into the room. The same man who had mutilated Rick Sheridan, and obviously Rick is Mark's friend. Rick does not know that Mark is invincible. So you have a very interesting dissonance there where Mark feels a sense of guilt over what happened to Rick, but Rick doesn't know that Mark was involved in any real capacity. So here he is, has this friend, has been mutilated. This guy did it. You knew he did this, and now you're employing him? This is twice, okay? This is, you know, you only get so many before I have to interject and deal with you. And Cecil leads Mark to this room, the White Room, which we understand early in the series has a special place where there's something in the water that we all drink. We couldn't see what's happening in this room. There's special lights that keep us from seeing things. Funny enough, there's a third wall break to explain why you can see Cecil. It's very funny. They don't really explain it. It's like, we don't know. It just works. But what happens is Cecil has invited Mark into this room to attack him. He calls it to protect himself, but it's very clear he's brought you in here into a trap. How do you define who's right and who's wrong? Mark is calling him out for this thing. Cecil is acting very much so in a suspicious manner, but his argument is, you are causing trouble, and I have to protect myself as well as the greater good of what we're doing. You know, in this sense of things, you are but one small cog in the wheel of world global security. I have to do what I have to do. And in this regard, he is revealing, not only have I brought you into this room, you are probably outmatched in a way that you don't understand. By way of turning off the lights in the room, you see it's filled with all these guys that D.A. Sinclair has made. And Mark has struggled with these guys before. Mind you, due to Cecil's efforts, he's gotten stronger. There's a lot of combatants in this room, and that could be a serious problem. And obviously, Cecil is trying to de-escalate the situation by, showing reason. Look, you're outnumbered. Don't do this. Mark's like, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to let you do this. Then, of course, Cecil pulls a Hail Mary and figures out that the earpiece that they've been using can emit a sound that is so high-pitched that it affects the equilibrium of Viltrumites, because otherwise they are virtually indestructible. As you guys saw from the show, $4 billion to give Omni-Man a nosebleed. He can't risk that sort of action in here, and so he attacks Mark in a big bad way. There's a lot of things that Mark ends up doing to try to get away from Cecil, and ultimately he gets to a place where he finds the former members of Team who are now former members of Guardians of the Globe, and kind of reveals that this is what Cecil is doing, and they help him. They help stop the thing from going off. And Cecil, gets threatened by Mark. How interesting is it in this moment that, in the sense of morality that Mark is making, he tells Cecil, I'll kill you. He has almost forgotten his own platform of morality because he has been threatened so thoroughly. He's like, you know what, you've come at me so hard. The only recourse that I have, to be honest, is that I will kill you if you do this again.
And then the very next story, the very next issue, is basically Cecil going through the same thing when he was younger.
Yes.
Right? And so you see that the degradation, the deconstruction of Cecil's morality when he was younger put him in a space that he may feel like he's totally open, but when it's challenged, he goes pretty binary. And so it shows that it's kind of a traumatized form of psychological coherence, if you like. So, conference out in Europe, we're apologizing for overtime. We're going to close here. What we want to say is that comic books can be seen as a technology that capitalizes on the neurocognitive dynamics of daily life. allowing readers to organically develop immersive and complex narrative worlds. In short, we propose that manipulating the coherence in comic books can help individuals grow. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I'm going to stop sharing that.
Thank you.
Then we're going to, I'm going to get my act together.
Thank you.
Carolina Gonzalez.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mainstream audiences aren't, or creators aren't necessarily producing in that way. There are very select few. So books like Vision, they do that. Visions is all about a synthetic being having a family and interacting in a way that is either a family dynamic versus his position in the rest of the world as an Avenger. And it's very interesting the way that it portrays itself because, have you guys read that by Tom King? It's fantastic because you have the sense that Vision is this character that is a strange anomaly. He's a person but not a person. He's a hero but he wasn't built to be. So there's so many different aspects that they play around with that. And really I think Tom King is a huge proponent for deconstructing the sense of what is a true hero. And let's see, Heroes in Crisis obviously is a series that does so. His series, Mr. Miracle, definitely does so. Strange Adventures currently does so. And then Vision's story does the same. So he's a writer that is very clear on the idea that we have almost escaped or outgrown the simple concept of the hero, and let's really start to look at heroics from a position of personal choice. You know, I would love to actually see him do a story on the Punisher, just because that's a really questionable person, but how does he shape his moral compass? You know, how does he determine what is good enough or bad enough for his intervention? And I think that would be great.
We can even go back to Kirkman's Walking Dead,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
The difference between Walking Dead and Invincible is Walking Dead is so local all the time, and Invincible wraps up these same moral questions in the universe in ways that I think gives Kirkman more degrees of freedom for challenging ideas in Invincible, because the zombies are aliens,
right,
but they're not smart, right? They're not Alan. Right. There's nothing to learn from the zombies, and in season 2 of the show, they played with the idea that zombies have consciousness, but the ideas gets played around with, and Marvel tried it with Civil War.
Right.
I'm not going to say they didn't do it, but they didn't do it.
But it's also been a long time since Civil War came out, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, we're looking at 15 years since that came out. So there's like a whole other age of comics that we're in that doesn't qualify for. So it's very
picture.
Yes.
So kind. Okay, let's go ahead and go to another picture. Question, excuse me. Let me unmute my mic.
I'm gonna repeat that for the audience. So the question at hand was, in terms of creating surprise, the idea of Invincible, specifically the show, being an animated series, does it give you this intention that maybe it's open for everybody, it's all ages, it's for kids, it's superheroes, it's animated, and clearly by the time you get to a certain point in the first episode, right, like at the White House, you get this understanding that not quite. This is a very bloody thing, and you're absolutely right. One of the things,
scene, man.
exactly. That's later in the episode or in the season. But yes, the idea of the genre or format, because that's one of the things we have to push for, is that the media format does not designate the audience type, right? So too many times we have comics are for kids. Have you guys heard that? You guys have all heard that. But we know clearly, like if I give a kid Watchmen, either they're never going to understand it because they have no context, or it's just going to traumatize them because it's not for kids. The same thing with Invincible as a cartoon series. It too is not for kids. You know, the idea of we're in this golden age of superheroes and media. If somebody's like, oh, I love superheroes because I've seen the MCU movies, and they're like, I'm going to watch Invincible. Totally different experience. It is not the same.
I bet you there are a lot of parents that were freaked out.
Oh my goodness, absolutely, because they didn't catch it.
They didn't know him.
And in the reference to The Walking Dead, one of the things I think that is most interesting is that I do believe on purpose they used a lot of the same actors from The Walking Dead in Invincible. So if you wouldn't let your kid watch The Walking Dead because it's too violent, too gory, they were trying to give you a hint. This is about to be the exact same thing. Because the same players that were used to getting their heads bashed in with bats or all these different things are stars in this next series. And you're going to get the same energy, the same action. That was a great question. Very true. The question is, do we think that the creation of surprise in superhero books has become harder because that's been kind of the vibe for the last 30 years?
Since Watchmen.
Exactly, since Watchmen. But I would have to give it a slight bit of pushback because there's a difference between creating surprise and deconstruction. And so I think that by deconstructing superheroes, which is what books like Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns did aptly, very well, we are now better able to understand how to create surprise. Those two things go hand in hand. So we understand how it works, and we understand what the tropes actually do, and that's how we're able to circumvent that and do surprise so well. There's some wonderful things that later on in the Invincible series that happen that are so grossly uncommon. Unless you're a die-hard comic book reader, you're hard-pressed to find another book where that's happened. It has. One in particular, I'm just going to lead this one, is the interaction between Anissa and Mark later on in the series. There is an interaction that they have that, for the most part, when it actually happened, people are like, that's never happened in books before. But the more astute comic readers are like, actually, no, this happened to, Nightwing or, something here. But it's so few and far between that it does, stand as a never stance. It doesn't happen. And so I think that's what happens is that the deconstruction era, which I think was the mid-'80s into the 2000s, allowed us to break apart what our norms were when it came to comics, so that now we have new ground to say, well, here's the twist. Here's the thing that you didn't see coming for all these different reasons. And you could look at it from a multitude of perspectives, and that's the variance that we have that allow us to keep surprise going.
Yeah, I want to quickly follow up on that Watchmen statement, because Watchmen is seen as being deconstruction, and the stories itself is a mystery, but the page-to-page surprise, the frame manipulation, the world building isn't as multi-level.
Right.
Or
it's subtle. It's more subtle.
Yeah, and you're bashing, 40 years. So it is harder to surprise. Anyway, it is. Well, I'll shut up because my phone rang and it surprised me. I lost my mind. So you can stick around. We're gonna be with this crew here for another 10 minutes.
We want to thank everybody that tuned in for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Awesome.
All right.
Feel free to hang out. Do you guys have some questions from the internet?
Obviously, Invincible, the show and the comic are very violent.
Yes.
And, just wondering what you think. How do you walk the line in terms of having that much violence and have it not be gratuitous, but and not just for shock value, but actually serve.
That's a great one.
Did you guys see that question in Europe?
The question was, how do you walk the line with consideration of the gore and violence in Invincible from it being, true to the story to not being gratuitous? And that's one of the things that this show does in a phenomenal way.
Oh my gosh.
It does walk the line, and it's hard to say where it would have teetered over. I think the thing that really is the true point of interest here is that story comes first. And if it was gore for gore's sake, but it did make sense to the story, then it would be gratuitous. But every time that we saw it, it had a purpose. Even to the sense of the title card, there was a sense that every time that more blood splashed on Invincible, it was because he was getting hurt deeper, more. It was a bigger trauma to him that was actually happening that kind of illustrated on the title card. It was the sense of him living up to that phrase, I am invincible, and seeing the pain that he has to go to in order to prove that. So, yeah.
Even the train was all about story.
Yeah.
Nolan had to show Mark that we are qualitatively different types of beings.
Right.
And the things you do to ants,
Right.
I'm not trying to say it was right or just or anything like that. But in terms of Nolan trying to explain to Mark the difference between humans and Viltrumites, that scene was plot driven.
Right.
And he made Mark kill every one of them.
He did.
I mean, it was. I'm not going to say brilliant because then it'll go on YouTube and I'll be called.
No, that is brilliant. You can quote me on that one. That was brilliant.
It was stunning.
Yes.
And it was all story.
Yes.
It was all story. So
Absolutely.
good question.
Okay, great.
Of course, not everybody knows if it's a good story, though, right?
I'm saying it is. Spoiler. It's a good one.
Victor knows. Any other questions from here?
We shut the room down. They weren't ready. I love it. I just knew there were going to be more questions. So that's a surprise. I love that.
Surprised in the show.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Actually, when you're talking about like Immortal, one that died away, I noticed that other shows are kind of delved into that too, like Titans did
Yes.
that with,
Yeah.
well, Nightwing, Hawk, Dove, pretty much all of them at one point or another.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, it kind of feels like a lot of people, I don't know how old,
Feels passe now.
yeah, people are like stealing from it. A little bit.
The idea of the hero that walks away.
Yeah.
Well, so again,
Go ahead and tell
talking
them
about,
what you said.
the question was the idea of the hero that walks away being a trope now, that we're really seeing that happen where a person experiences some sort of trauma or loss and they decide that they don't want to be a hero anymore. Here's the wild part. It has been a part of our comic reading experience for almost 30 years, and we haven't seen it in a way that we recognize that that's what it is. Case in point, Dark Knight Returns, one of the greatest Batman stories of all time. It starts off with the concept that Batman quit being Batman, but we never find out why, right? We never have this explanation as to why he stopped. It's just told that he did, and we just move forward. That's been a big piece. The place that we're in now is that it's okay to explore the vulnerabilities, particularly of male characters, that they have felt something that causes them to walk away. That is okay. It doesn't diminish their masculinity, and that's not been something in the boyish fantasy realm that comic books have often represented to showcase. We weren't allowed to feel. So the idea that he quit because he felt something, oh, no, that's too taboo. You don't say that. But that changed even to the point of seeing Kingdom Come Superman, right? The idea of in Kingdom Come, Superman quit not because he lost someone, mind you, because he does, right? And not when Joker kills Lois Lane, but he doesn't immediately retaliate against Joker. He doesn't immediately quit. What causes him to quit, spoiler alert for this fantastic 25-year-old book, is that the public opinion in response to the person that killed Joker for what he did was acceptable. Superman steps away because he's like, I can't be your hero anymore because what I think is right, you don't. And that's why I've stepped away. Because you have grown in a capacity that I can't follow. But again, that's a moral, feeling-based scenario that became more acceptable, in a global sense as to why he stepped away. Now we're in a place where you can say, the love of my life died, and now I can't find a reason to save anyone. I couldn't save her. Why am I supposed to save you?
To bring some sociological data to this discussion, 70% of men who chronically reveal their suffering to their partner are left. There is no space in this culture for male suffering. Now, those are just data. So when we have people that are in the service, we have surgeons and nurses who are doing things that could hurt people every day, and we don't have a place for them to express the trauma, pain that those kind of activities cause. We end up with an increasingly sociopathic culture, right? So these stories are actually important in the sense that they're providing people models of how to be male, how to be around males, or anybody that the world hasn't seen. Just like the conversation between Eve and Mark about the relationship and how to be open and how to have conversations. There's therapy going on
Absolutely.
on those pages. So
these are more than just entertainment. I would argue these are truly cultural tools. I will tell you that when I was growing up and I was reading Tolkien and fantasy novel, I was finding human values in those characters that weren't being expressed in a lot of the people in my life. And that mattered. That completely mattered in terms of me coming to figure out what kind of person I wanted to be. So, no, I love the fact that pop culture is leading the discussion on these issues right now. I'll just stop there.
No, that's a great place for us to stop. I think that's fantastic. Oh, the boys.
They're asking about the boys.
There's my answer.
Ooh, that's a really good one. Okay, so the question in terms of the boys is what do we think in general of those characters and the way that they're portrayed, and whether or not there is an implication socially of how they're projecting heroes' real behavior. So in order to answer that effectively, I have to be honest about what I know about the boys, and specifically that Garth Ennis is the co-creator of the boys, and Garth Ennis is a noted, very open, he despises superhero stories. He does not like them. That's why he doesn't often write them. Or if he does, they're always going to take a very cynical tone in his belief that these people with absolute power must be absolutely horrible in the use of their powers. They might project for the general public this persona of, oh no, I'm a friendly person and I'm great and I'm awesome. But there's something internally that they wrestle with all the time that is monstrous, without question monstrous. They are sometimes violent, they're incestuous, they are manipulators, they are abusers of some sort and kind. They're addicted to things. There's so many different extremes that they operate on in their regular life because they live in an extreme state all the time. So that's kind of his feeling on it. Do I think that...
Can I go in there on the boys? What I love about the boys is it's privatized superheroism.
It is.
And someone my age who has seen American culture become increasingly privatized in our neoliberalistic state for the past 4 or 5 decades, this is a slam in the face. Even the things you called heroes are bought and sold.
That's right.
And who comes after them but the folk, right? These people that are not in the norm, they're on the fringe of culture, who say, whoa, we got to go against them, and it gets so violent because those heroes, they're violent. So for me, it was just kind of icing on a cake in terms of a conversation about neoliberalism, conversation about privatization, and I absolutely loved it.
Absolutely. In terms of its effect, I think in the most ironic way, to show people that are supposed to be your leaders being deplorable almost stops people from doing so. It's as strange as it is. How many video game players do we have in the room? How many GTA fans do we have in the room, right? Okay, so Grand Theft Auto is a game that is inherently violent. And there have been a ton of people that have suggested that by playing this game and exercising their violent impulses keeps them from being violent in real life. And I think The Boys is the exact same thing. By seeing people respond in extremes that you know are inappropriate, kind of gives your mind that sense because your mind can't tell the difference between them doing it and you doing it. But then you don't walk around with the guilt of having exposed, yourself or your intentions in this way. And so it's a way to exercise what would be negative feelings and context safely. So you experience someone else doing it in this fictional realm. It satisfies the brain's impulse for your actual need or your instinctual need to do it, and therefore you're safer.
Yeah, see, that's exactly what I told my wife. Every episode of The Boys, baby, I'm practicing, not hurting people. This is how I do it, man. She goes, my psychologist, man. No, baby, for real, Victor told me it's how it works.
There you go. Sometimes you have to watch violent things so that you're not violent.
So we have 2 minutes left. Is there a question in the Wizard World audience?
No?
Okay, is there a question in the Coherence and Comics world?
Excellent. Absolutely.
That's how I justify all that anime. Attack on Titan, yeah, baby.
It makes us better. Thank you guys so much at the conference. We thoroughly, again, appreciate you inviting us to take part in this.
So, Our absolute pleasure.
I love it. I love it. Thank you guys for being here. As we round out, Scott, where can people find you on social media?
So I run a YouTube channel called Dark Loops Productions, where Victor and I have a little thing we call Three Guys and a Story, where our colleague Dr. Stanford Carpenter joins us, and we did Jupiter's Legacy last time, and we talk about the comic in relation to the story that showed up on Netflix and such. I like to have conversations that are like an hour and a half long, like you'd have after a good dinner, and you're going back and forth and no one wins, you just have fun. So those are the kind of things that show up on Dark Loops Productions.
Definitely follow and subscribe to him.
No, please, he's awesome. You can find me on the Illinois State University Department of Psychology webpage, markedly different from Dark Loops Productions. And I do a little thing called ReggieCon that Victor's part of. So every month, our university organizes a virtual con panel over a graphic novel that celebrates the month that we're in. So October, we're celebrating LGBTQ History Month. We're going to talk about Emil Ferris's award-winning My Favorite Thing Is Monsters, and Emil Ferris is joining.
Awesome.
So it's virtual. Anybody can watch from anywhere in the world. It's all over the world. I'll try to find a way to send the link to you guys if you want. All of you. So, so that's what I'm doing. How about you, Victor?
You guys can find me on all forms of social media at Vantage In-House, all one word. You can check out my books, vantageinhouse.com, where I write some of the best comics in the universe. I'm not just saying that because I
Comics not written by me. That's
what I'm saying. It's the best comics in the universe written by me. So that's what they are. And you can also check out You Create Comics if you want to make your own. I help you do this. So it's the letter U, CRE, the number 8, comics.com. We have programming as well as products, traditional products to help you make your own comics from start to finish. So again, thank you everyone for coming in. We appreciate everyone. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.